went through the ceiling, and it didn't explode until it got up above the plastered ceiling. But it did have enough concussion that it picked me up and blew me down the hall about 30 or 40 feet. And the whole ceiling came down on the other guy. But we both got out of it okay. And then the next day, we went on into Aschaffenburg. And as we went in, down the main streets, we noticed that there were bodies hanging on the lampposts, several bodies, half a dozen bodies hanging on the lampposts. What had happened is that one of them was a Luftwaffe officer who was in the Air Corps, and he tried to convince the commanding officer there that he didn't really need to stay around, that he might as well get out of town. They executed him and hung him on the lamppost. And there were several other officers that had tried to talk the commanding officer into surrendering because their situation was hopeless. But they wouldn't do it, and the commanding officer had them executed.
Gene, how did they get the bodies up on the lamppost?
I have no idea.
Oh.
They were just hung like they'd been hung there.
With a rope.
Had a rope.
Throw a rope over it and
well, they have the lampposts there have a bar that comes out, an arm that comes out, and they had a rope around that arm and down around their neck, and it was just suspended there. So anyway, from there on, we went down through a series of small towns again. Patton would go around them with his tanks, and it was up to us to go in and clean out the towns. And we came to the Danube River, and they were going to build a pontoon bridge to go across it, but it came under heavy enemy fire, under mortars and sniper fire and so forth. And the river was pretty swollen because of the water condition at the time. So they finally had to give that up. And they elected to have us go across in boats. And the water was pretty swift, so in the middle of the night, of course, but raining like everything. And we got in the boats and went across the river okay. We ended up probably a mile down from where we put in. But we got all back together over in the big empty field, and no place to go. So we spent the night there. I can remember that night. It was very cold and rainy, and we're out there in the open field. And I always, when I found myself in a situation like that, I always got busy with my trenching tool and dug in as good as I could. And I neglected to say that we lost our commanding officer there on the banks of the Danube. He was the type of a guy that would get up and walk around no matter what the conditions were, seeing to his men and seeing what was going on and everything. And he got killed in a mortar attack one day when I was there. So we lost our commanding officer. But from Aschaffenburg, we went on down to Nuremberg, which is one of Germany's most beautiful cities. But it had been almost completely demolished. And we didn't spend much time in Nuremberg. And then it was on down toward Munich. And we got to a little town about 20 miles from Munich called Dachau. And then we heard that I Company of our regiment, which would be in the 3rd Battalion, a rifle company, would be the one that would go into Dachau to liberate the camp. But for some reason, their heavy weapons company, IJKL, which would be Company L, and their battalion had another assignment. So they came and got 2 machine gun squads from Company H, which was my company, and that's how I happened to be called to go over to the camp. This was, I guess it was about the 29th of April in 45. And so we went on over to the camp, and they were just liberating the camp. The riflemen had been there first, and it was a chaotic scene. The prisoners were wanting to, of course, to get out of the camp, and they were trying to keep them in the camp to kind of get some kind of organization going, get the people that were ill taken care of first, and so forth. And there were quite a few of the worst of the guards that hadn't made it. They were scattered around. The prisoners had turned on them when they knew that they were going to be liberated. And some of them that were taken prisoner didn't make it back to POW camps because of our own GIs. It doesn't happen often, but the situation was so terrible that some of the guys just lost their coat. And anyway, they estimate that about half of the prison guards were killed during the liberation. But that was about it as far as the camp. I can describe the camp. Dachau was not only a concentration camp, it was
extermination.
Pardon?
Extermination.
Yeah, an extermination. And it wasn't only Jewish people, it was gypsies, it was people that had mental disorders, all kinds of people were in the camp. And people were not only taken, they were taken into what were called, they thought they were showers, they were labeled as showers, but when they got in there, they turned on this lethal gas and killed them, and then they were cremated. So a big part of the camp was a crematorium, and they actually shipped bodies in boxcars from other camps into Dachau to be cremated. And then in addition to that, they had one big area where they had a hospital where they did experiments on prisoners, an experiment how much pain a person could actually stand before they either died or passed out. All kinds of interesting experiments that they did on people. But we did take the people out of the town of Dachau and bring them into the camp and make them go through the camp and actually see what was going on, so that I figured that more people that knew about it, it wouldn't be lost in history, and we would actually realize what had gone on there. But we got over there, my group got over there, and they found that they weren't going to need us, so we were sent back to our own group that evening. And then it was on to Munich, and this was, I guess, early in May of 45. We went on down to Munich, and there again they ringed the town, and the rifle companies went in along with us to secure the town. And I had an incident there that was a very close call. It was about lunchtime or about noon, and our commanding officer or our sergeant said, he said, well, let's take a lunch break. We'll go in here and have our rations. So we stopped at a little house there, and I can describe the house. It was a very small home, and it had a porch that was kind of enclosed. It had a couple of, up these steps, it had a couple of posts that ran up to the roof on the porch. And then the porch was maybe 10 or 15 feet across to the door of the house. And as I walked up the steps, I was carrying the tripod for the machine gun, and my back was aching and tired, so I just stood on the top step, put my arms over on these posts. They're just against them, kind of rest my back. And I noticed that there was a GI trying to get in the door into the house in front of me there. And he had what they call a BAR, it's a Browning automatic that the rifleman carried. And he was trying to get in the house, so he was pounding on the door, and evidently when he pounded on the door the first time, it cocked around into the firing chamber, and he didn't realize it. And just about that moment, my squad leader, Sergeant Sissovic, came up behind me and tapped me on the shoulder. He says, "Let me through, would you, Hobby?" Called me Hobby. And so I just dropped one arm and kind of swung around sideways like this. He stood up where I had been. About that time, the kid hit the door again with the butt of his BAR, and it fired and shot my sergeant right through the chest, killed him outright. And
through Africa.
Yeah, just a coincidence, the way things happen. But anyway.
This is not the last day of the war, wasn't it? That's the last day.
That was on the last day of the war, and that's what it turned out. And this sergeant had been with the outfit clear from Anzio in Africa, all the way up through Sicily and Italy and France and into Germany, and had killed by friendly fire on the last day of the war. But, of course, I think of that quite often when I see my grandkids and stuff.
So does Rick.
Yeah. Anyway, that's pretty much my story. I ended up in Munich. I'm going to call on Dale in just a second here, but after a few days or a week or so in Munich, we had a new company commander, and he was straight from the States, and he was all spit and polish, so they had us out doing close order drill over the objections of all the GIs the day after the war ended. Anyway, he wasn't very popular. And then they sent us out on the outskirts of Munich into a little town where we were billeted in people's homes, and we spent 2 or 3 weeks there hunting and fishing. The fishing was fantastic. The only thing is we didn't have very good gear, but those big German brown trout, you go along and drift a hook underneath the undercut banks that had been there for 100 years, and you hook onto one of these big German brown trout. So we'd take those home and have the Hausfrau get some of that good German Pilsner and those fish, and had a great time there for a couple of weeks. And then we were sent to our area where over in La Havre, where they processed us to Camp Herbert Tarrington, named after cigarettes, which the tobacco people were, by the way, were so nice about furnishing all the troops with cigarettes in our rations.
Even in the K rations.
I think they were thinking ahead. But that's pretty much my story. I came home on a little round bottom boat called a Sea Owl that was rocking both ways all the way across the Atlantic. And everybody was sick all the way home, but got home and was sent to a PW camp in Roswell, New Mexico for a short time on duty, and then sent to Fort Bliss in El Paso for my discharge. Act as a designated liberator of the camp at the Holocaust Memorial Service here in Boise, which I did, and I made up this little booklet for people to look at if they wanted to.
thank you.
Thank you.